A very good afternoon to all of our viewers, and we take the opportunity to welcome you to another edition of Let's Talk. Always delighted to welcome you. We about 6 minutes or so late this afternoon. Edition of Let's Talk, but we are always delighted to welcome you. Anyhow, we do have 6 minutes or so late this up, or maybe I should say we had a technical challenge a little while ago, but we are going to press on by the grace of God. This afternoon, we are concluding our discussion on ministry in a changing world. Next week, we have a very important discussion lined up for you. I am excited to let you know that as we have been accustomed to here on Let's Talk, we discussing some real issues, and next week is going to be no exception. We are going to be talking with a very special guest. I'll give you some information at the end of today's program. But for now, we are dealing with a very important subject this afternoon. And with me is our Family Life Director. We are wrapping up Ministering in a Changing World, Family Dynamics. You may say part 3. We're talking today about intimate violence. Intimate violence. What a subject this is going to be. Pastor Adams, we're delighted to have you with us this afternoon for this final session. Welcome to Let's Talk once again.
Thank you, Dr. Greene, and it is always my delight, and welcome to those who are following us on this platform, those who are listening, those who are viewing. And yes, this is the major issue we're talking to, because I'm not so sure if we did say to our viewers or listeners what we meant by family dynamics, but I would probably say that right now, that we're talking about the processes that goes on in establishing and maintaining a relationship. They can either be positive, they can either be negative, that makes the relationship either healthy or toxic. Procedures or processes that goes on in the relationship, particularly intimate relationships, dealing directly with the family and how we enter the experience of marriage and the family. That includes our communication, how we resolve issues, our communication, conflict resolution skills, all of those matters we are talking to in terms of family dynamics. But this particular one here we're dealing with has to do with some of the toxic situation that may develop in family, in relationships, that we don't want to talk about, that but it is a major issue that we need to address, both in the church as well as in the context of the community.
Well, yeah, indeed, Pastor, and I'm excited to go into this discussion. We started a bit late, so we're gonna have to go quickly. But before we go, we do need to have a word of prayer. So we invite all of our viewers to take a moment to spend with us as we talk to God this afternoon. Shall we pray? Father, be with us as we go into today's very, very important discussion. Grant us your wisdom, your grace, and your guidance. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Well, Pastor Adams, as you indicated just now, we are talking about this subject of intimate violence. You know, the challenges of family relationships. In our last discussion, we raised the issue of maintenance and repair. We did not have time to go into details. This is right. Important because we do not just want to highlight the challenges in family dynamics. We want to provide meaningful solutions. Like a physical house, if we do not maintain, we will have to eventually do extensive repair work. So let us
definitely. I didn't know if you made the statement. I think it is you, either you or me made the statement the last time, and I think it's worth repeating. Even though marriages are made in heaven, but the maintenance takes place on earth, and that the real work of marriage is the work of the afterlife. After you come from the altar and say, I do, that maintenance work begins immediately, and you cannot graduate from it.
That is so true, Pastor. And I think that's a point that every married couple and anybody who's planning to get married needs to be mindful of. You know, you get married, the work doesn't stop; it starts. And
Yes.
a lot of maintenance work. I think last time I mentioned that if you do no bad thing, we certainly said this on another program we will talk about in a while, but that if you do nothing bad in your marriage, but you don't do the extra good things, your marriage will tend to go downhill. So
Yes.
maybe we can, as a start for this afternoon, Pastor, just share briefly some of the things we can do to keep the marriage going well.
Yes. There are some major thing. Number one, which is the biggest one for me, positive communication, because there's a communication in marriage that is not positive. In fact, when I have to deal with trouble marriage, there is where I jump at first. It is funny how people talk quite a lot before they are married, but after they are married, they go silent. They don't talk anymore. In fact, that's the time you need to talk even more. So to me, that's the main hub on which everything else hinges. So maintenance work begins with communication, because communication does a number of things. It minimizes the issues of misunderstanding. Communication improves the self-worth of the other person in the relationship with you. It is what increases the intimacy of the relationship, because there are functions of communication in marriages to improve the intimacy, to decrease misunderstandings, to increase understanding, and to increase one's self-worth. Because part of this whole work, maintenance work, is to build up the other person, and that's a biblical concept over there in Ephesians, right? So number one, the main thing is communication. I find a number of marriages, troubled relationship, faulted. In fact, the research that is done by Olson and DeFrame and other family scientists, they have mentioned communication as number one. All the longitudinal researches that we have done over the period, marriage and family science have said that communication, one, and conflict resolution, two. Right? Because the two of them are linked to one another. So if you have very good communication skills and you have real positive conflict resolution skills going for you, you are on your way. That communication that is open and non-judgmental, non-threatening, not communication that is toxic, communication that will lend to the growth and the development of the relationship. So communication, conflict resolution skill. Then you have to have deep regard and respect for each other. And out of that deep regard and respect for each other, that brings with it the appreciation and the affection that you will show. In fact, for every one distasteful thing, you should have 5 positive things going for you in the marriage, as you communicate this, as you communicate affection and appreciation. These things, these words of affirmation, right, are essential. Every day you must find something that is beautiful in your spouse, in your partner, that you can validate, right? Very, very important. Then you have to spend enjoyable times together. You have to make memories, right? Enjoyable times together. And it's essentially the secular researchers have said that. And to my next point, the spiritual well-being, they have found that those families, those couples who share spiritual intimacies, like they pray together, they attend worship together, whatever religion they espouse, it's one of the 10 strengths of happy characteristics of strong families, right? Then the other thing is managing stress and difficulties. In strong families, when there are stresses, when there are difficulties, family members do not turn away from each other, but they turn towards each other, right? And that's a positive thing. Then the positive emotional connection, right? This is so very, very important, because if there's not positive emotional connection, you can be sure that the marriage is going downhill, because really there would be emotional insensitivity, and if that exists, the marriage is going downhill. The people might be in the same space, sleep on the same bed, occupy the same four walls, but there's plenty of insensitivity and the marriage is drifting in an emotional sense. Then doing things together like chores, right? And like I said, I always try out of my own experience to share, not just as a presenter to make people think that, okay, you're just talking to the ideal. There was a time when I was so busy in my career that I did not um, take part enough to me in the household chores and responsibilities, and that didn't work well. I had to correct that. And the minute I got more involved in the household chores and sharing the responsibility of home, that did quite a lot of things. So you must also have chore time. And I'm talking directly to the males on this platform this afternoon. We can't be just so busy with our jobs alone. We come home, sit on the couch, or go on out with the boys. We must have chore time, right? We must help with the homework with the children. We must go to the grocery. We must do some laundry. We must help to cook and prepare the dinner. And so those chore time, we must do that thing. We must do some cleaning from bedroom to kitchen and back. Chore time, we must be involved in those kind of things. Then strange, eating a meal together. You know, I when I was over in Davis, I was having a seminar, and this thing stuck with me. One of the seminar participants said, in this modern society, this new information technological age, right, where we are addicted to the screen, we are not sharing any moments together at mealtime. We are not eating together. Everybody eats in their own space, going into their own room with their gadgets. And we have a dinner table, we have a lunch table, but we're not sitting there together as families and eating a meal together anymore. And the researchers are saying that pays off in great dividends for the family when the family sits together and share a meal together. In fact, it has not just social benefits, but also intellectual benefits if there are children who are there in that family setting, right?
Pastor, there is any one of these points that you have raised so far, we could spend the rest of the program on.
Yeah, sure. That's the truth. But
I'm sure that you do have quite a few more, but we want to get to something. So we're going to have to allow our viewers to be satisfied with those that you have shared so far. I just want to make a brief comment here, though, because the matter of the second to last point you raised there on the issue, now I'm forgetting it, but
chores?
No, not chores, the one before that.
The emotional connections, positive emotional connections.
Yes, it is so important that we turn, when we do have challenges in the relationship, when there are issues, rather than turning away, that we turn towards each other. You know, there are some individuals who walk away, they don't want to talk because they're upset, and some do what we call the silent treatment, but it is so very important. I just wanted to stress this, that rather than walking away, rather than turning away from each other, that we turn toward each other. Now, again, we did start late, so I am very conscious of our time today, which is why I'm kind of rushing here. But, you know, maintenance is a necessary thing in a marriage. And all these things that you have shared, eating a meal together, some of them may seem rather very simple, but the structure of societies today and homes today, you know, just re-emphasize the need for us to go back to these basic things. I remember once making the point, in fact, I made a point earlier today on this program, that if you do no bad thing, but you do just the ordinary things, you don't do the extra good things, that your marriage is about to go downhill. And by the way, I made that point on Marriage Encounter. Marriage Encounter is a weekly program here on Second Advent Radio on Thursday mornings at 10:30 and 6:30 p.m. on Thursdays, and also on SLC Adventist on Saturdays at 2 p.m. So for those of you who have not been listening to Marriage Encounter, we really encourage you to listen to Marriage Encounter, because on that program, we deal with marriage issues. We have been doing that for the last 15 or so years, and we continue to do that. Now, there is a culture in the Caribbean, especially among men, Pastor Adams, that there is no need to attend seminars and counseling sessions and the like for marriage enrichment. They tell you they don't need anybody to run their marriage. They know how to make their decisions. These are important maintenance work, you know. Going to a marriage enrichment seminar together, that really has significant dividends for the married couple. How damaging can the attitude be that you know, I don't need anybody to tell me how to run my marriage. I don't need to go to a seminar. I don't need to go to a counseling session. How damaging can that be? And what would be your appeal to such persons?
I will say that we need to debunk that idea forthwith, because I think I have stayed together, or we have stayed together this 33 years in marriage because of all of those seminars and enrichment programs that we attended. Because when you thought you really knew, it is when you get to sit down in this space and understand some things. Because you see what those things offer, because quite a lot. Let me I've established the fact that debunk that idea, right? No marriage is so good that it cannot become better. And so when you attend these programs, you're actually making the marriage and the family life better, because if the marriage fails, the family will fail. So anything that will offer you information and insights and all of that, and the know-how to better the marriage. Once you are bettering the marriage, you are at the same time strengthening the family, and that is what we want, you see. So I think that, and then we say in my culture from which I came, that both persons need to get information, because one hand cannot clap. We say there's two hands that clap. So if the two people are really intimate allies, then both of them need to get the information, because one person can go to the program and get information, but the other didn't get it. And so how are we going to implement it? Because if we see ourselves as intimate allies who are in this thing for the long haul, then whatever it takes for us to grow this marriage, and so growing the marriage include not just reading literature on marriage, and there are a lot of them that is coming out, but in attending seminars, workshops, enrichment programs. Because see, a lot of these enrichment programs, a lot of the work is are practical things, and a lot of it also has to do with evaluation. There are a lot of instruments on those programs that help you to evaluate every aspect: your finance, your communication, your sexuality, your problem-solving skills. A lot of work is done in those areas, a lot of evaluation, a lot of instruments of evaluation on the practical part, so that you can know where you are and how you need to improve and what you can do. That is what the seminars and enrichment program really offer, and you can't lose doing that. In fact, I would want to say, I think I don't know if I'm going ahead of myself, but that's one, those who benefit from premarital counseling together as a couple will naturally want to go to enrichment programs. They will see it as a necessity, right? Because of what that premarital, I think was the last program we spoke to, how important the premarital preparation and all of that is, right? If you've been through real professional premarital counseling, you will desire to have these enrichment experiences as you go along the way. Because we said no marriage is perfect, and it is even to arrive at the point of total oneness and intimacy is a goal yet to be reached, right? Intimacy is progressive. It's a goal yet to be reached, right? So you cannot say that you have arrived and you don't need anything. You are really fooling yourself, and that's not the position to take, right? No marriage can be so bad that it can become better. No marriage is so good that we cannot work at making it the best that it could be. So enrichment, I would say, is very important, very necessary. But again, I guess is the sociological culture of the Caribbean, how it has affected us. And in fact, even globally, men, well, I can't say globally, because there are some parts where men are really high on these things, right? And it is part of the empowerment that males need, because the soft skills and those kind of things we get in these enrichment seminars and programs. And so, in fact, as I am putting down my plan, I'm looking at the program for the from boys to men, because I believe that the Caribbean male, and because I work in this context, I really want to talk to that. The Caribbean male is lacking. We have, when I talk about male empowerment, I'm talking about for us to debunk this toxic masculinity and get the communication skills, conflict resolution skills, these soft skills that we need as men to function in intimate relationships and in family life altogether. I believe our sociology, how we were socialized as males in the Caribbean, and I guess globally, has affected us in significant ways as we enter family life. I think we enter family life quite a lot with this deficit in our own experiences. I'm talking directly to males, right?
It's interesting that you're saying that. I did promise that I was going to share the topic for next week at the end of this program, but given that you are talking about sociological concepts there, what we are going to be starting a series next week. We have a special guest. I won't tell you who the guest is yet, but the topic to begin with is the sociological impacts of changing gender roles, a Caribbean perspective. And that is going to be quite a discussion. But
certainly that is going to be quite a discussion. Certainly.
Quite a discussion. But for now, I want to press on because we are just about at the halfway mark, Pastor, believe it or not. Wow. And we have to get to this matter of intimate violence. So today we are really looking at intimate violence. It's a vexing problem. This puts the marriage in a category of repair work. Whenever there is intimate violence, we move from maintenance, the need that is for maintenance. As you mentioned earlier at the beginning, at the onset, that marriages were made in heaven, the maintenance is done on earth. And every day we ought to be doing maintenance work. When there is intimate violence, the need moves from merely maintenance to repair. And sometimes, depending on what the violence is, repair may not even help. But nevertheless, the intimate violence damages the marriage. That's the point I want to make. But can you just share, when we say intimate violence, what are we really talking about?
Well, that's one of the more modern terms, intimate partner violence, that we traditionally call domestic violence or domestic abuse. We are really talking about a pattern of behavior in any relationship that is used to gain and maintain power and control over your intimate partner. It is a pattern. Notice the word, right? That's a very important term. That's a very important word in the definition. It is a pattern of behavior in any relationship that is used to gain or maintain power and control. And there are several forms of violence in which this abuse or violence manifests itself. It could be physical, sexual, emotional, economical, or psychological action or threats of intimidation, terrorization, manipulation, humiliation, hurt, blame, injure, wound, all of these, right? So the forms of violence, intimate partner violence or domestic abuse, they're all there. I did mention some of them there very quickly. And I should also say that the incidence of intimate partner violence or abuse is really isolated and is usually escalate in frequency and severity. And domestic abuse may culminate in very serious mental health issues, injury or death. So when you talk about that the relationship can be repaired, sometimes it can come to the point where it is not easily repaired, or maybe you come to the point where it cannot be repaired, period, depending on the factors and the variable, because there are a lot of variables when we are dealing with this particular area. It has to do with the timing of the intervention, the willingness and the support, the willingness of both the victim and the person who is the perpetrator. It's a lot of work, not just with the victim, but also the perpetrator and sometimes the whole system, right? Because usually you have to address the whole system when dealing with this issue. It is really a painful, difficult situation to deal with. In my own experience, right? when you are dealing with these cases, if you have two of them in a month, difficult ones, you really don't want anymore.
Yeah. Now, I think we can all agree that violence does not belong in marriage.
Not at all. No one deserves to
No.
be abused.
But you know, one of the first things I want you to address, Pastor Adams, as we talk about intimate violence, intimate partner violence, domestic abuse, whatever term you want to use. And this is that once there is intimate violence, it is not just enough to say, I'm sorry, and move on. You know, I have come across a few individuals who have had some serious domestic abuse issues, and they say, well, you know, we spoke and we decided to make up and we move on. I'm suggesting that this can be likened to getting your foot broken and deciding to fix it yourself without going to the doctor. When there is violence of this nature, you need help. You need counseling. You know, it's a good thing to forgive, but you know, you are seeing the manifestation of issues there that are very challenging, and there needs to be some professional guidance there. Can you speak to that, Pastor?
Seriously, because of the cyclical nature of abuse, right? Remember, I said just now that it really does not de-escalate, but rather escalates. Because you see, after the battery or acute incident, there's normally that honeymoon period where a lot of reconciling. When we deal with this, there's a poem that we use when we have seminars and workshops on these areas. You give me flowers today, meaning that there's after the episodes, a battery incident, the perpetrator behaved in all of these very, you know, loving and all of these kind of romantic ways before the next episode. So you just cannot say that because the person came and said, I am sorry, let's make up. That is what we used to do traditionally, because I have to go back traditionally when we did not talk to this issue and it was not a major issue. That was that society does not talk to this. Everybody said, okay, mind your own business. It is there, but intimate partner violence, domestic abuse is not a private matter anymore, because the incident, in fact, it is so serious that World Health Organization have now said that intimate partner violence, domestic abuse is a major public health issue globally. Because the statistics say to us that 1 in every 3 women will experience some type of intimate partner violence abuse in their lifetime. You see, so it is not just to say, okay, this happened, I'm sorry, and not only the abuser, but sometimes the victim also minimizes. So it takes a skilled professional, because a victim could say, okay, it is not that serious, it just give me a little slap or something, but that is not the case. You see, so you have to investigate that thing very seriously, because it is cyclical. It might be linear, which it is ongoing all the time. It might be linear, punctiliar, it might be seasonal, and then it might be just a one-time situational response, right? So you have all these forms, and so you just can't say, okay, I'm sorry, but you don't know that when the person, in fact, we do that a lot of times, and that is why some of our people end up staying in abusive relationships, because we always say, okay, let us pray, you all make up, go back home, things are going to be fine. No. Sometimes you have to move the victim out of that situation, depending on the severity of the abuse and what is going on. And I have run into people say, okay, partner, pastor, you're breaking up the family. But because of the nature of abuse, how it escalates, you want to protect the victim, and particularly if there are children there. So it's not necessarily the abuse that is made, but if there are children in that setting that witness the abuse, regardless of what form it takes, whether it is verbal abuse, physical abuse, whatever form it takes, if you have children in that setting, makes it even more serious, because generally speaking, we say this is a learned behavior. So you are actually perpetuating this abuse generations down. And so sometimes the intervention would require moving the victim out of the situation and holding the perpetrator accountable. It could be the pastor who comes to the pulpit on Sabbath morning, all dressed up and ready to preach, right? Dr. Greene, if you hear that I did Carol anything, you have to hold me accountable.
Well, I wanted to jump in a little bit because I think for those who are listening, you made the point that even the victim sometimes minimizes the thing, and they may say things like, it's just a slap, it's a one time he did it, and those kinds of things.
Yes.
I really hope that the folks who are listening do understand, and time is going, but I'm taking my time with this one because this is something we have seen, this is something we have witnessed that is a challenge, and lots of times people find themselves in these situations and they become trapped. So we are saying it is not enough for you to try to work it out on your, with your partner. Your partner has become violent. You need help. And the help that you need is not to run to your sister or your brother and say, look at what happened here. You need professional help in a situation like this. If the marriage is going to be healed, if the marriage is going to grow, if constructive repair work is going to take place, you do need to get professional help. But Pastor, I do need to move on.
Yes. The word that we use there is entrapment. You run the risk of having entrapment, being entrapped in that situation there, and there's a particular type of person, of woman or wife or spouse that may well experience that entrapment, if I want to say syndrome, that entrapment experience. There's a particular type of person that will experience that. But or like I said, this is quite some discussion, is a whole week.
Yeah, well, what we're seeking to do is to bring awareness to the matter. We don't have enough time to go into all of the details. So it's a matter of awareness. And for those of you who are listening and you know that this is your issue, then reach out for help. Now, before we talk about treatment, because we want to provide solutions, how common is intimate partner violence in the Caribbean context?
Wow. That's $1 million question you're asking me. Because we do not document as much on how our professionals, even those who we have to report these matters to, because they don't really document and give us the statistics as they really should. But the estimates, in fact, domestic violence, United Nations 2012 report says to us that domestic violence, intimate partner violence, is highest in the Caribbean and Latin America. Notice what I said, is highest in the Caribbean and Latin America. So across the Caribbean region, women experience the higher rates of domestic and sexual violence. All Caribbean islands have higher rates of sexual violence than the world average. All Caribbean islands have higher rates of sexual violence than the world average. 1 in 4 women in Guyana, right? 30% in Trinidad and Tobago, 67% in Suriname, 30% in Antigua, Barbuda and Barbados, 61.7% in Jamaica, 30% in Dominica, and where I am here in St. Kitts, it is 44%, right?
Now, I have to stop you there, right? Because the lowest percentage you call there for Antigua, Barbuda, Dominica, and some other place is 30%.
30%.
And now, if 30% is really just about 1 in 3, that is pretty.
And that is based on reported cases, right? Because you cannot document what is not reported.
Yeah, and I'm saying that is pretty serious. But you have spoken about 40%. You've spoken about 67%. We are talking about more than half the women who are married in a situation like this, in a 67% case, 44%, close to half. That is rather pretty alarming. And it does say something. It does say that what we are talking about here this afternoon is extremely relevant.
Very, very, very. In fact, the lady the CARICOM advocate for gender violence, Dr. Rashina Wilshire, she said that the sexual violence, domestic and sexual violence rates, her actual term, soaring in the Caribbean. And she says that and she was having this interview with United Nations, And she's saying that if we don't arrest this problem, it is going to carry the Caribbean region down a very serious path. And she's actually saying that we need to do the work now to arrest this issue, because it's going to take the region down a very serious and dangerous path if we don't really correct this matter quickly. You see, and the implications, not only the rate, that the statistics that I showed you, but what implication it has for mental health, for sexual and reproductive health in women, the substance abuse, because women who don't have any means of coping, as a correlate, we see the incidence of substance abuse also on the rise, because remember we said, even though you mentioned marital or spousal relationship, we are talking about violence in the other relationships, like the friending and cohabiting relationships, and even the dating relationships, right? We have incidents of abuse in the Caribbean here, right? That is very, very worrisome. In fact, the overwhelming global burden of intimate partner violence is borne by women, since about 90% of the victims of violence are really women.
We are dealing with some heavy stuff here, Pastor. I hope that those who are listening are paying attention. Well, let's talk about treatment. Mary Doe is married to John Doe, and he's an alcoholic. I'm using an example here, of course. He's an alcoholic. Before I get to that, before I get to treatment, somebody may be listening and may be saying, well, thank God I'm a Christian. This doesn't happen to Christians. Can you speak to that?
I will speak to that and probably make a shocking statement to say that abuse is highest in Christendom. And I will tell you why. Intimate partner violence and abuse is highest in Christendom. And the first thing is because of the conspiracy of silence, right? So usually we hush the thing down, right? We don't want the world to know that these issues are affecting us, because we are supposed to be religious people. And more than that, it is highest among Christendom because of misinterpretation of biblical texts out of the scripture, because of a lot of misinterpretation of the biblical text. And I am mindful of this, because I pay from a religio biblical perspective. Abuse is highest in Christendom because of the conspiracy of silence, as well as the misinterpretation and misquotation of scriptures from the pulpit. And there are a lot of
and let me mention one other reason, Pastor. Unfortunately, because there are some persons who believe that if we speak, it's going to damage the church. So, you know, so we keep quiet.
Yes, the conspiracy of silence.
and it's really unfortunate. It is really, really unfortunate that you see, because some people use the religion, you know, we're members of a church, we're Christians, as a kind of smoke screen, as a kind of cover up, I should say, for perpetuating these acts of violence. And when you speak out, the brethren are quick to say, oh, you know, y'all could make up, y'all don't have to go public with this thing, it's going to damage the church. That's a challenge.
Go home, we are praying for you, the prayer warriors are praying. But this thing is so dysfunctional, and how it affects the victim, because the person can be sitting in church, the same members who are saying it's go home, is going to make up, that person is sitting in church and is thinking about the next episode, have not heard the sermon tightly yet, have not heard where the text is taken from. People can be that affected, and they're sitting there, come to church, dress up either Sunday morning or Sabbath morning or whenever they worship. It is that serious, because they might be thinking about, okay, is there going to be a next episode when I go home here from this religious meeting, whatever, whether it's a prayer meeting, whatever, you know. So we cannot say that because these we because of all of this, people are made to stay in very unhealthy, toxic relationships, and in the long run, and I'm glad that we are attempting to do a study on the emotional health and well-being of the farm in the Caribbean, through the Caribbean Union. I am really looking forward for that study to see what it will reveal, because I'm making the point on this program this afternoon, Dr. Greene, to all of our viewers on this platform, church, whoever listen, I don't know, our audience, because you run the risk of developing what is called a battered, you said this is Mrs. Mary Doe. That's the term you that is married to John Doe.
Yes.
Once you stay in that situation, you run the risk of developing what is called the battered wife or battered women syndrome, which is as a result, a direct result of long-term domestic abuse. In fact, the battered woman syndrome is it is classified now as a mental health disorder.
So before you go any further, let me complete the question, because I didn't. I jumped to something else so that you can respond appropriately. So the question really was, Mary Doe is married to John Doe, and he's an alcoholic. When he gets drunk, he becomes abusive physically and verbally. What does Mary Doe do? Does she say, you know, I'm a good Christian, I'm not going to do anything? What does she do?
No, Mary Doe, my advice to Mary Doe is to get out of the abusive situation, because it does not de-escalate, it escalates. And a lot of time when alcohol could just be used as a front or as a crutch, you know, but that is not the real reason for the abuse. And there's quite a lot of sociological literature on that part of it, right? You see, yeah, alcohol could be used as a mask, but it's not really the real substantive reason for the abuse. You see, but be it so or not, Mary Doe is running the risk of developing battered wife, battered woman syndrome, which is really a mental disorder. And it is under the subcategory of post-traumatic stress disorder, where you can have traumatic memory loss and you can have traumatic brain injury. In fact, there are millions of women who suffer traumatic brain injury because of the same thinking of Mistress Mary Doe, right? And sometimes, Dr. Greene, I speak to this, I get very emotional, because I lost my sister that precedes me to abuse. And a lot of time alcohol was involved, right? And she developed a brain trauma because of all of those head blows. So I am talking from experience what this thing can lead to. You need to get out of that situation, because I said traditionally we did not talk to this thing. We just said, okay, it is their business. It is usually their business until somebody is seriously injured or somebody dies out of that experience, right? So it is not okay to stay. It is okay to go and get help. Both the victim and the perpetrator need help, because in the technical sense, you really have two victims: the person who is suffering the abuse and the perpetrator. Because when we do profiles on that person is also sick.
You know, Pastor, I have come to realize that a lot of people traditionally have really suffered, and the church to some extent has failed them because of this matter of, let me pray with you and hope that things get better. And you know, I was doing a family life presentation to a particular congregation, and I mentioned, listen, if this is your situation, you need help. And one of the things you need to do is to get out of that situation. And people looked at me as though I was crazy.
No,
you know,
you're saying the right thing.
Is you have to get out of that situation.
You're right on point.
You cannot encourage. Maybe I should say you should not encourage. I have come to realize that a lot of pastors, and when I say pastors, I'm speaking across Christendom now. You see, because there are individuals who who claim to be ministers of the gospel, but they are untrained. They have no training. They start a branch someplace, start a church, and they become a pastor. And without the professional training to know how to deal with issues of marital problems, etc., they give incorrect advice. And a lot of people end up in badly wounded situations because of this.
Yeah. And more than that, if the pastor is, or because the church has a role to play in dealing with, if this comes to the attention, that even if you're untrained and don't have the skills, you should have a resource bank to which you can refer your members' membership to get the requisite help that they need. Because anytime you're talking about this thing that we are addressing, a domestic intimate partner violence, you're talking about professional intervention. It's not just, I'm not saying I'm a Christian counselor, prayers apart. You believe that the Holy Spirit will work, but it's the Holy Spirit plus, right? You have to have the skills and the training for intervention, because there are a lot of areas in which they say that light and darkness cannot dwell together. And for those who got upset with you, Dr. Greene, because you said separate, hear what I'm going to say. I'm quoting exactly from the Patriots and Prophets, right? Hear what my author says, that a disposition to cause pain to any of God's creation, including the brute creation, is satanic, and a record goes up to heaven. And God will judge all those who are involved in that type of behaviors. Even if when we also refer to child abuse, Christ himself said that, because there are several forms of child abuse. He says, if you hurt any of these here, it is better a millstone be hung around your neck and you be cast into the sea. It is that serious, right? It is that serious, you see. So darkness and light can be together. The person is really behaving. It's a demonic behavior. That is what the spirit of prophecy says. The abuse or disposition to cause pain, Patriots and Prophets, is satanic, and a record goes up to heaven.
There's one other thing I want to, you mentioned before, but I want to re-emphasize. And that is the fact that you're a pastor in a particular congregation does not qualify you necessarily to counsel individuals who are in these kinds of situations. And having a resource base to be able to refer, a good pastor should know when to refer. When when
the situation is out of your league or scope, right?
And I want to use an example, a personal example. I remember as a young enough pastor, Pastor Adams, I encountered my first suicide attempt case, right? In my ministry up to that point, I'd never come across a member who attempted to commit suicide. On this particular occasion, when this member attempted to commit suicide and left a note and we found it, fortunately, I was involved in an organization, a volunteer organization that was headed by a professional psychiatrist who worked for the government in that particular territory where I was. And because of the relationship we had, I was able to say, listen, I have a case here that I need some assistance. I've never dealt with one like this before. I need some assistance on it. And he was able to guide me. He was not a member of the church, but we're talking about a professional thing here. And he was happy. In fact, he said, let's form a partnership. He said, some people I deal with, I do need some spiritual guidance for them. And I'm not a minister of the gospel. So we can work together. And that kind of working relationship is really important. One ought to be able to know when to refer.
Yeah. And that is important, and it's so crucial. And let me just, I can't help, because you see, the impact of this abusive behavior, relationship, violence continues not only during the actual experience, but long after. We have to understand the long-term effect, right? There's also plenty of literature in terms of the long-term effect that it would have on the health. And I refer to that, the mental health and the physical and sexual and reproductive health. You need professional help if you are including these symptoms. If you're experiencing sleep problem, including nightmares, insomnia, if you have sudden intrusive feeling about the abuse, if you avoid talking about the abuse, if you avoid the situation that reminds you about the abuse, if you experience feeling of anger, sadness, hopelessness, worthlessness, intense feeling of fear, you have panic attacks or flashbacks, all of those things will are enough to say to you that you need professional help yesterday.
Now, our time is just about up, Pastor, but hear this. A lot of people listening may be thinking that, intimate partner violence only happens if somebody takes an object and hits the other person, if there is physical violence. So can you just quickly highlight that there are other forms of intimate partner violence that does not necessarily include the physical violence?
Yes,
Can you
it may not. Right, sure. So there are others like the psychological or the emotional abuse, and they could be that the emotional abuse could take the form of sexual, right? Where you're playing, and psychological, where you're playing mind games like threat and intimidation, right? Because I remember the professor said that this guy, after they got married, he took the family dog and killed it. He took the family dog and killed it and threatened the family that if anybody step out of line, that will be their fate. That's wow. He didn't hit anybody. That's intimidation. There's a case where the guy did not hit the woman, but there's a case that I dealt with back in my home country. She had just finished. She was a teacher, and I want to say that all social, intimate partner violence, domestic abuse, exists in all socioeconomic strata of society, race, religion, educational levels, all across society. He did not hit her or do anything, but she was preparing for her practical in the classroom, had all of her coursework and all of her things prepared to go to the, and he destroyed all of them. He didn't hit her, but he destroyed all of the props and all of these things that she had to use for her practical in the classroom, right? So threats and intimidation, you see, withholding, affection, all of these are from withholding. Economic abuse. You can withhold food or medication because we, in the family setting, you also have abuse of the elderly and the physically challenged. Because we're talking about ministering in contemporary society, right? So in the context of the family, where there is maybe blended family or the extended family, you have these family members are there. Somebody might be depending on you for food or medication, and you withhold those. All of those are a form of abuse, right? And so it's not just hitting somebody. In fact, the person can punch the wall or punch the door, which we call wood talking. The person did not hit you, but they punch the wall, right? Or slam the door in ways as to make it fall off the hinges, right? That is wood talking, you see. So the threats and intimidation, emotional, psychological abuse, economic, all of those are forms of abuse. Yes.
Well, we never have enough time to deal with everything. But what we have shared this afternoon, I believe, is sufficient to get people thinking, to understanding that, yes, we do have a real issue. And the fact that you are a member of the church does not mean that this cannot happen to you. The fact that you are yourself a professional doesn't mean it can't happen to you. It doesn't just happen to individuals who have no academic training. There are some very professional people who suffer these kinds of things.
Yes, definitely.
But our aim really is to bring awareness to the subject, to begin the discussion, and trust that, in your respective congregations, you can do what needs to be done. Of course, Pastor Adams is the Family Life Director for the conference, and I'm sure that he is going to be addressing some of these issues as we go along. I did mention—
I'll be putting these in document forms and giving to my leaders that they can share with the congregation and that they can have educational program at all levels, AY societies meeting, because there's a whole section on dating violence that our young people should know to spot the signs and the symptoms before it starts and know that you have to exit this and don't go any further with this. There's a whole section on dating violence and what you need to know.
And I also want to mention, re-emphasize that Dr. Bratton and myself, Pastor Adams, you used to be a part of this program, and I'm looking forward to the time when you will rejoin us.
Yeah,
but
sure.
we have Marriage Encounter, as I mentioned before. It's a weekly program, and we deal specifically with issues relating to marriage. So we do have lots of avenues for you to do follow up and to go deeper into some of these things. Next week, just as I promise you, next week we are going to be starting a new series. We will have a new guest, somebody who has never been on Let's Talk before. And
right.
we are going to be addressing the sociological impacts of changing gender roles, a Caribbean perspective. I
am going to be there, all ears.
All right, wonderful, wonderful. I am looking forward to that discussion, and I want to encourage all of you who are listening now to share that information so that, because this is a very important area, and that's all the time we have for today. Unfortunately, we have to end now, but may God be with you. Thank you so much, Pastor Adams, for sharing from your wealth of experience, and I am looking forward to some of these sessions that you will organize with individual congregations or districts, as the case may be.
Yeah, sure.
We really do want to provide practical help for our people. So thank you so much to those of you who have been with us. That's all the time we have for today. We will see.
Thanks for having me, and thanks to the viewers and listeners. Just share the knowledge, share the information. And God bless you until we meet again.